The things that we do now will influence our future. And this influence of our future is greatly determined on the cumulative effect of our past. Now, when we look at this and we just break it down, it's so common sense that the things we do now and a few seconds later and a few seconds later, a few days from now, all these things in the greater future will have an cumulative effect that gathers and gathers. Just as we go to school and we learn subject matter and become more proficient. Maybe a surgeon that learns how to cut into the body, how to repair something, how to sew it up, how to deal with the anesthesia. All these things, it's a process of learning. And you don't just do it overnight. You don't just wake up and through osmosis when you were sleeping, just learn all these things. So how do we put it in perspective though for a prepper? Now, a prepper, survivalist, someone who's learning a lot of bush skills, like a bushman, bushwoman, a bushcrafter. These individuals, though, over time, they develop who they are. It's just like anything else. And you have to do things like put time into it. You have to put focus. You have to be, perseverant in nature. And overall, though, you have to actually have that deeper desire, that will to better yourself. And you actually have to want it. Because things just don't fall in your lap most of the time. There are some people who have great fortune that is just randomly, in their favor. But I would say for over 98, 99% of the people, it's not how it happens, You work very hard for everything you have and for the knowledge and for the thinking that you do. And then that's a good point there, because really your thoughts are just an accumulation of thoughts you've had before, so you come to the conclusions you come to now. So I'm just curious about how you feel about the accumulative effect on preppers, and maybe that has something to do with some of the conclusions that we come up to. Some people are always doom and gloom. And some people are mostly very upbeat and the glass is half full on everything. And even though they prep, they just don't actually really worry that they're actually going to have to really use it. And so you have this continuum of people that are either extremely negative and morbid, and all I want to talk about is cannibalism and the worst things possible that society could turn into. And then you got those people who just want to make it a fairy tale and make it a great adventure, and everybody's going to be having fun. And yes, there won't be any more power grid, but we could actually have picnics in the park every day and hold each other's hands, and everything's going to be just so wonderful. When the reality is probably more in the middle, that says, well, people will die, and we're going to have a lot more time on our hands for people to think things through and to develop better relationships. So there's a balance, but at the same time, though, everybody's going to have to work harder and have a lot more focus, because right now it's amazing how it is that modern day life, you literally can get a very niche type of job. You could do something that's so specific. Just think about it. You can actually have a job in this modern day that you answer phones for a company, and that you may have 10 to 15 different types of things that you normally answer and talk about on the phone. You may simply just redirect a phone call. You could be a switchboard operator. Nowadays, a lot of that is actually automated, of course, but there are some places that literally just have a real switchboard operator, and all you do is just redirect calls. And that's a very, very specific niche type of job. Just think about that. A couple hundred years ago, that would have even been thought about. You could never make a living doing that. Never, ever. That wouldn't even have any value back then. But can you imagine that person, that switchboard operator, that phone call receiver? Can you imagine that person, though, maybe having no skills and all? I'm not saying that people that do that job have no skills. I'm just saying, let's just say that's all you do and all you know. And that you can get through life with that. It's worse when you think about the people who take advantage of welfare, and they don't even have to do that. They can just sit back in their Section 8 housing and do nothing and get the checks and get paid to eat and to take a shit and to do everything else. And to me, that's even more pathetic. But let's just try to be a little bit more upbeat. And let's just say that you actually have a job and you actually go to that job, but that job is just so very refined and specific that it doesn't even make sense, even, a few decades or even especially a few hundred years ago. So you have that example. And with that example, you can only imagine what kind of hardship and what kind of stress that life is going to actually throw your way when you have to deviate from that, when that job is obsolete and there is no more phones, or there are no people calling because there's no phones to call on. Can you imagine how your life's going to be? What are you going to do? What kind of skills do you have now? Do you have any capabilities? That is what I'm talking about. When you look, especially in the modern day world, in Europe and in America, in parts of Australia, you look at all these little niche jobs, these little tiny little specific jobs, and maybe even like over in China and stuff, there are some people that have those industrial jobs, and all they do is they just they solder one spot on a circuit board all day long. They get carpal tunnel and stuff, and then they get fired. But slave labor does exist. But in general, though, those people are going to have the most difficult problems, because unlike maybe an auto mechanic or someone that actually is a gardener or a farmer, or someone that actually has probably, a little bit more of a depth and range of general consensus and need types of skills, those people who are maybe like the garbage person, as helpful and as needed as they are in modern society, if there is no vehicles that are working and there's no gas that can be pumped because there's no grid, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? The majority of the population work in niche jobs. When you think about it, the service industry, the telecommunications, the infrastructure of our electricity, holy moly. I'm thinking honestly, because we don't hardly produce anything in factories and things that actually have craftsmen, at least in that sense. Can you imagine? I would say easily over 50%. It's got to be over 50%. I would say maybe 60 to 70% probably be a lot more correct. These people are, this large majority are going to have massive suffering, massive fallout, and unbelievable proportions, because they don't have anything else to fall back on. Just amazing to think about that. So that's just going to compound the problems that we're going to have if we ever had a collapse, because the majority of people would have no skills and no intuitions, no plans to counter these hardships, and they will die. And so I don't want you guys to die. I want you guys to thrive. So get yourself squared away now while there's still things on the shelf at your supermarkets, and while the ground is still good, and while we still can get seeds and we can grow our own foods. And having a few pet rabbits and chickens isn't the worst thing in the world. And so go get some chickens. All right, bye.